The tools to which a paleoclimatologist depends to know about the ancient climatic condition, that is the proxy, because it is the indirect evidence of ancient climate. So that is known as paleoclimate proxy. Now, the study of past climate change, as we know that climate is not fixed, it always changes with time. So the study of past climate change helps us to understand that how humans as a biological entity influence the Earth's climate system. If we look at the climatic record over the last 1,000 years, we can clearly see that the global temperature changed, particularly increased significantly in the 20th century. And more precisely, the temperature change was very abrupt, temperature increase was very abrupt, particularly in the last 150 years, that is the age of industrial revolution. So one behavioral change, one revolution in our life habit causes the environment, the climate to change. So paleoclimatic record allows us to examine the causes of such kind of past climatic changes. And not only that, with the help of this kind of study, that is how climate change through time and what are the causes behind these, we can also predict our future, that is how much environmental, how much climatic change is happened or will happen in near future by human influences. So for study of diff past climate, we have to look for the indirect evidences, because as a human being we cannot go directly to the past, and these indirect evidences give us the information about the past climatic conditions. Now these proxies are different types. Some are physical, some are chemical, and some are biological. So here you can see some of the uh, proxies, some of the tools by which we can get information about ancient climate. So from ice cores, from tree rings, from fossilized spore and pollens, corals, lake and ocean sediments, speleothems, that is the stalactites and stalagmites found in caves, packrat medians, and numerous others also. So together, all these proxies give us. Now if we look at the proxy records of climate, these proxies are giving us two types of informations. The first is the span of the record, that is how far back in time the record allows us to peer, because some proxies are very good for recent climatic conditions, some proxies are good for much ancient climatic conditions. So not all the proxies are same in time span coverage. Secondly, the proxies also have different level of resolution. That is, the proxies shows different level of detailing of the climatic condition of ancient time. That is known as the resolution of the record. So these two aspects, these two factors are different from one proxy tool to another proxy. Say for example, here you can see a graph where different proxy are drawn. You can see clearly that some proxies are very good for just the past hundreds or thousands or lakhs of years. Say for example, tree rings, ice cores, lake sediments, the coral reefs, they are very good for the last thousand or lakhs of years. But for the much ancient time, they are not giving the record of climate. In contrast, others like ocean sediments, continental coastal sediments, they give us the much needed climatic record of ancient time. So you can see that different proxies have different span of geological time. Now, depending on our necessity, depending on the availability of these proxies, we can study the past climates. Not only that, not only the span of the proxies, as we already discussed, that the different proxies have different resolutions also. So some proxies give us records that have large span of time. Say for example, here you can see one proxy giving us the record of climatic condition. Say for example, the temperature for the entire uh, Phanerozoic time. So those proxies which gives us records of a vast time span, they have lower resolution. That means the smaller ups and downs, the smaller variations of climatic conditions that are not recorded in that proxy technique. In contrast, there are some proxies which, although have short time span of coverage, but they will give us a very high resolution. Say for example, in this case you can see this, with the help of some proxy tool we can get an idea about the temperature condition of Cenozoic time. Now the same temperature is also estimated with this proxy tool. Say for example, this is the proxy tool 1. So with the help of proxy tool 1, we can see that in the Cenozoic there is a steady decrease of temperature. In this case, we can see there are smaller ups and downs in Cenozoic. But say for example, this is proxy 2. So you can see the proxy 2 is higher in resolution than proxy 1. But if you go through the proxy 3, you can see that it has a much higher resolution than proxy 1 and 2. You can see numerous ups and downs, lots of ups and downs, lots of variations of temperature throughout the entire scenery. So the resolution in this case is much higher compared to in this case, where the coverage of time span is much higher. So some proxies cover a larger time span, and in that case the resolution is low, while some proxies with short time span have higher resolutions. Now, apart from this, as we already discussed, that proxies are not good for all the geological times. Some proxies are uh, good for recent times, and some proxies are good for older times. So if we want to know the climatic condition of the entire geological time, we have to depend on multiple number of proxies. And with the help of proxy records with overlapping time frames, the climatic condition can be correlated to build up the record for a larger span of time. Here you can see, for say for example, from fossil sales, as we already know that fossils or biological bodies are highly abundant in the Phanerozoic time. So from fossil sales, we can get the temperature data easily throughout the entire Phanerozoic time. Say for example, from fossil sales, we get temperature data for the last 600 million years. Now, before 600 million years, as the shelly organisms, that means hard part bearing organisms, are rare, so therefore we are not able to get good amount of temperature data from fossil cells. So definitely, for getting data beyond this time, we have to depend for another tool. We have to go for another tool. Say for example, in this case, that will be the sediment record, sediment core data from the mineralogical records preserved within the rocks. We get the temperature data for the time span beyond 600 million years. Now you can see that in these two records, this portion, the temperature record around 600 million years, is common. So when we match these two records, when we overlap this time frame and the temperature record, we can get the temperature data for a longer amount time. So for the recent times, we get the temperature data from fossil cells, and by overlapping the sediment core data of temperature with this fossil cell temperature data, we can get temperature data, say for example, for this case 900 to almost 1000 million years. So in this way, by overlapping one proxy data to another proxy data, we can get the climatic record for the entire geological time period. Now coming to the different types of proxies one by one. So apart from going to the geological records preserved in different forms in the rock, people first go for some historical documents to know about the past climates. Say, for example, here you can see in a paper published in 1922 from Alabama, they published a news which says that Arctic may become temperate zone. That means there is a change in temperature condition observed in Arctic regions. So these kinds of data published in any newspaper, published in any scientific journal, published in any book, or someone records some climatic condition in their personal notebook, in their bibliography. So these kinds of records helps us to know about the recent past climatic conditions of any region. So they are also helpful without visiting the geological tools. They also, these kinds of historical documents also gives us valuable informations about past climates. Now coming to the geological records of past climates, the proxy which uh, tells us about the past climates. So the first tool is the sediments preserved in lakes and sea floors. Now those sediments which are exposed on the surface that we can directly see and that we can directly examine from the outcrops to know about the ancient climate. But if we want to know a continuous history of some geological time, then we need a continuous sedimentary succession. Now, rarely these successions are exposed in the surface, and often when these sedimentary successions are exposed in the surface, they are affected by the surfacial processes. So many signatures, many evidences are either destroyed or they are modified. Now, for knowing these kinds of uh, climatic conditions of ancient times from the sediments, which are particularly preserved in lakes and sea floors, scientists go for sediments core. That is, they uh, put some instruments on the surface and drill the surface, go inside the surface and takes core of sediments. Now, firstly, scientists use the size and shape of sediment, that is the sedimentary texture, along with the sedimentary structure to get information about past processes, that is at which environmental condition these are deposited, what are the natural agents which are responsible for weathering and erosion of these sediments, uh, in which direction these sediments are flowing and deposited in the basin. So these kinds of environmental uh, factors, environmental informations are found by observing or by studying the sedimentary texture and primary sedimentary structures. Now, in a basin, which is basically occurs below the base level of erosion, every year billions or tons of sediments blown by winds or by rivers, they are deposited. Now, when the sediments are carried by rivers and deposited in a basin, they tend to show variation in sedimentary composition, sedimentary texture, etc. etc. And this variation is basically depends on the seasonal condition within a year. Say for example, during monsoon, when there is lots of rainfall occurs in the land areas, so lots of water is flowing within the river channel and it cause intense weathering and erosion in the source areas. So during the monsoon, when the weathering and erosion process is uh, very high, a river erodes one kinds of sediments and these freshly eroded sediments are deposited in the basin. In contrast, during winter, when there is less supply of water, that is flow rate or flow velocity within the river channel is very low, then definitely the erosivity power of the river also decreases. So less amount of weathering and erosion happen in the source. So thereby mostly in the basin the river deposited fine grained sediments. So we can see that depending upon the environmental condition within a year, there are variation in sediments found in the basin. During monsoon time, when the water supply is high, when the flow rate within a river is high, it deposits one kinds of sediments and mostly these sediments are fresh, uh, light in colored and coarser in size. Whereas during winter, when the flow rate is very low, mostly the sediments are fine grains and relatively darker in color. So we can see that within an entire year, there is variation in grain size, that means sediment texture or sediment composition. So often we found that in the lakes and sea floors, some kinds of annual layering are formed. Here you can see this type. Now with the help of this type of annual layering, we can get a precise yearly resolution. We can get idea about the geological condition year after year, and within an year we can also divide it into two broad seasons. One is the monsoon season, another is the winter season. So when scientists collect the long sediments cores and examines the sediments in this core, they can easily reconstruct the past oceanic conditions in year by year depositional history. Apart from this, when these sediments are deposited in the uh, lakes or oceans, along with them some terrestrial as well as marine micro and macroorganisms, they are also deposited with these sediments. Say for example, the spores and pollens from coming from the terrestrial plants, the marine animals, the marine plants, they are also deposited after their death with those sediments. Now, by studying those organisms, we can also get an idea about the environmental condition, about the climatic condition of that time. Not only that, some kinds of abnormal deposits, say for example, the volcanic ash. If a massive volcanism occurs and thereby aerosols are sprayed into the atmosphere, then after some time in suitable condition, when these ash settled, they are also found to be recorded within these marine or lake sediments. So these kinds of annual layers in the sedimentary core records, they give a very good idea, very good indication about the past climate. Now, these annual layers are very commonly found in glacial lake condition. You already know that the glacial lake deposits are known as varp deposits, where these kinds of annual layering, where the variation of sediments is clearly identified and annual layering is clearly seen in glacial lakes. But apart from glacial lakes, in marine and terrestrial lakes also, these kinds of layerings are found. Here you can see that the sediment cores are drilled from a rock record, and they are treated in the laboratory with uh, some distinct marks and a definite size. They are cut and they are preserved like a book of, like different books preserved in the library. So they are preserved with definite numbers in definite order, and in this way scientists preserve the sedimentary cores in a library setup. So anyone in the world, they can study these cores according to their necessity. Second proxy from which we can get uh, the record of ancient climate is the ice cores. So these are the similar like sediment cores, but here the entire core is made up of ice. Now, to get ice cores, the first thing is need is a cold temperature condition where fresh accumulation of snow occurs mainly during the winter. But the main thing is that not only the accumulation of snow have to occur during the winter, but these snow which are accumulating in the winter time, they must have preserved during summer time, because we know during summertime the temperature increase. So in an area where there is ample amount of snowfall during winter time, but during summer all the snow melts, so ultimately we did not get any kind of ice record of that area. So the melting procedure of snow should be discarded, should not happen. And if melting of snow does not happen, then only we can get a continuous record of ice as cores. Now, the areas which are favorable for these kinds of accumulation must be the polar ice caps, must be the polar areas where temperature is very low year around. But not only the polar ice caps, the high altitude glaciers, even in the low latitude regions, say for example the mountain tops of Himalayas, the high mountain tops, they are also good source for getting ice cores. Now, layers of ice, say for example, here you can see one drill site in Antarctica that is very famous, the Vostok station, where we can get the ice core record of 4,20,000 years old, continuous ice core record. Now, after getting the ice cores from the field, they are cleaned before they are cut into smaller pieces of 2-meter sections. Scientists extrude these ice cores from the barrel and clean them and cut them into uh, 2-meter sections so that they can be handled easily. Here you can see, like the sediment core, the ice cores are also preserved in the laboratory with uh, proper marking and proper informations, and this kinds of ice core laboratory is found in Denver. So Denver is an example where these kinds of ice core laboratory, like a library, was found. Now, when scientists study these kinds of ice cores, they found that these ice cores have alternating light and dark layers. Now, these bendings, these alternating light and dark layers, sometimes they are visible in naked eye, and sometimes to identify these kinds of layering, scientists have to go some detailed study, some finer resolution, maybe with the help of X-ray or other high resolution microscope. So whatever may be the process, scientists examine the ice core samples and they found alternating light and dark layers within the ice cores. Now, these bands indicate some definite conditions. Light bands corresponds to the relatively fresh, clean snows that fall in the summer when warmer condition bring more moisture from the oceans, because more and more evaporation happens in the oceans, and that evaporated water circulated through global circulation model towards the high altitude or towards the high latitude regions. There they condensed, and from this fresh water vapor condensation occurs, so the snow precipitated from that water vapor is very much fresh and light colored. In contrast, during winter, when the temperature is relatively low and thereby evaporation is very less, so there is less amount of supply of water over the high altitude atmosphere or over the polar atmosphere. So in these conditions, particularly during winter, little new snowfalls occurs, and mostly these snows are mixed with some blowing sand or dust particles, which results discoloring of this white snow, and thereby the snow becomes slightly darker in appearance. So when there is lots of evaporation, the atmosphere over the polar regions get lots of water vapor, so fresh uh, snowfall occurs. Snow is lighter in color, but during winter when there is less supply of water, um, the snow condensation was very low because water vapor supply is low, and mostly these snows are mixed with the blowing sand and dust particles, and thereby discoloration of this snow occurs, and the snow precipitated is becomes something darker in color. So you can see in a yearly scale resolution, we can get the ice core record. Together, one light colored band and one dark colored band indicate a year around precipitation of snow. Now, what informations we get from these snow records? Firstly, by observing the bandings within the snow cores, we can get the uh, year around data, yearly resolution data from the ice cores. Secondly, the records of accumulation of the ice layers. So how much precipitation occurs during an entire year, that can be found or that can be recorded from the thickness of the individual layers. So indirectly that will give an evidence of individual year's average temperature condition. So if in a year average temperature is slightly higher, average temperature is relatively warmer, then we will get a thinner uh, annual layer, and if in a year the average annual temperature is low, then we will get a thicker annual layer of ice within the entire ice core. Apart from this, the ice cores also host some impurities, and these impurities gives us valuable informations about the atmospheric condition of ancient time. Say for example, the volcanic ash preserved in the ice cores. So definitely during that time, a massive volcanic event happened, and due to that, the ash layers, as you can see in this dark color, which is distinctly different from other kinds of bandings, is formed to be preserved within the ice cores. Now, one of the most distinct ash layers in the Greenland ice cores is seen to this picture of 55 centimeter long piece of an ice core, and this incident of these ancient ash layers is of about 55,500 years old, which is believed to originate from an enormous eruption in Iceland. So you can see these kinds of age determination as well as some uh, climatic disturbance are precisely dated and precisely recorded with the study of ice cores. Not only that, sometimes the ice cores also host some air bubbles. These air bubbles are trapped within the ice cores, and they are the direct evidences of past atmosphere. And as they are the direct evidences of past atmosphere, particularly the atmospheric composition, so we can get an idea about the levels, about the uh, percentage of different gases. Say, for example, the greenhouse gases, the percentage of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and others also. So, directly by studying these tiny gas bubbles which are trapped within the ice cores, we can get an idea about the ancient atmosphere, and also we can compare the ancient atmospheric composition with respect to the present atmospheric composition. And sometimes it was found that the current levels of carbon dioxide and methane are pretty much higher from other levels from the past 4 lakhs years. So when we get these kinds of bubbles, we can uh, study these bubbles, we can get the composition of ancient atmosphere, and as I told, we can compare with the present day atmosphere composition. And it was found by studying the uh, 4 lakhs years record that the present greenhouse gas level is exceptionally high throughout these 4 lakhs years. Here you can see the ice core record in Vostok. This is the ice core station in Vostok, Antarctica, from which we can get similar kinds of uh, gas bubbles trapped within the ice, and these gas bubbles provides us a continuous record of climatic history of Antarctica over the 4 lakh years. You can see from these gas bubbles trapped in the Antarctica ice cores, when we studied them, we can get the carbon dioxide concentration with time, and when we plot them in a binary diagram with age, you can see the carbon dioxide levels is varying in a significant way during the last 4 lakh years. There are lots of ups and downs in the carbon dioxide level. So sometimes carbon dioxide levels are low, and sometimes carbon dioxide levels are high. Now we all know that as this carbon dioxide is a important greenhouse gas, so it have a significant effect in increasing the global average temperature. So we can predict that during those times when the carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere is high, there or during that times, the average temperature of the earth was relatively warm, relatively high. Apart from these records, we can also go for isotopic study from the ice cores. Now, as we know that a water molecule is made up of two ions, two ions of hydrogen and one oxygen. If we study each oxygen and hydrogen separately, we can also get an idea about the climatic condition. Say, for example, when we study oxygen isotopes. Now, in nature, we all know that oxygen mainly has two isotopes, O16 and O18. Although there is O17 also, but O17 is very negligible in amount. So mainly two isotopes are oxygen in found, O16 and O18. Now, when evaporation will happen from the uh, ocean or lake water in the warmer regions, water containing both lighter O16 and the heavier O18 during the time of evaporation in the vapor state, more O16 will go because the lighter isotopes will always prefer or will always go to the less dense form. So say for example, if the water contains 98% O16 and 2% O18, then there is a relative fractionation occur in the vapor state of water during evaporation. So in vapor state, this ratio is changed. So in vapor state, say for example, 98.5% O16 is found and 1.5% O18 is found. So both isotopes are evaporated, but the lighter isotopes will always prefer to go in the less dense form. So as water vapor is less dense, so O16 is preferably goes to the vapor state. So you can see there is a fractionation occurred between the liquid water and the water vapor. Now, when this water vapor slightly O16 rich water vapor moves towards inland, say for example from equator towards polar region. So at higher elevations, from this water vapor it forms clouds, and from the clouds condensation occurs and precipitation occurs in the form of rain or in the form of snow. So when these clouds is moving towards the high latitude regions, then condensation occur and precipitation occurs. Say for example, fast precipitation occurs is nearly uh, around 30-degree latitude. So now from this water vapor cloud to precipitation, as the water is relatively higher denser form, so from this water vapor rich cloud to rain, more and more O18 will go because water is high density form. So more O18 will go from cloud to rain. So whatever amount of O16 and O18 present in the cloud, in the water vapor, that is again disturbed with this precipitation around 30° latitude. So the cloud now become depleted in heavier oxygen isotope. So as the clouds moves towards more and more high latitude regions, gradually it will be depleted in heavier oxygen isotope. So in polar regions, the precipitation occurs that will be rich in O16 compared to O18. So high amount of evaporation enhances more precipitation of O16 in the polar areas. Now, within the entire latitude frame of Earth, you can see their fractionation occurs. So, at the same time, you can see if we consider all precipitation areas and their isotopic composition, as we move towards high latitude areas, you will get more and more O16 rich water. So there is a fractionation occurs of oxygen isotopes as we move towards high latitude areas. Now, when evaporation, say for example, this is the present day state, there is a certain amount of evaporation and certain amount of precipitation occurs in uh, different latitudinal condition and also in the polar regions. So polar regions is relatively rich in O16 compared to the marine waters in low latitude regions. So marine waters is always rich in heavier isotope of oxygen compared to the ice or snow found in the polar areas or in the high altitude regions of mountain tops. Now, the fractionation of oxygen isotope is also indicate the change in temperature condition, because this fractionation is very much sensitive with respect to temperature. Now, when the temperature of Earth is relatively warm, say for example, when global warming is going on, so more and more evaporation will occur, the evaporation rate becomes high, so there will be a lot of O16 will go into the vapor state from the marine water, and the simultaneously the ice or the snow deposited in high altitude regions or in the polar regions, that will be enriched with O16, although that ice is relatively rich with O18 compared to that time ocean water, but as much and much O16 will first go into the vapor state from the ocean water, so definitely the ice is also reached with O16. In contrast, during global cooling, when the average temperature of Earth is low, so very low amount of evaporation occur from the ocean surface, so lesser amount of O16 will go into the vapor state. Now as lesser amount of O16 will go into the vapor state, so definitely in the polar ice caps that will also receive less amount of O16 if we consider the precipitation is more or less constant. So you can see the variation or the ratio of heavier isotope of oxygen and lighter of isotope of oxygen, that is the ratio of 18O by 16O, that will vary with time depending on the temperature condition of the earth. Now this ratio is known as or is symbolized as delta 18O. Now this delta 18O shows higher values, that means enriched in heavier isotope of oxygen when the average temperature is high. That means more and more evaporation will occur, so lots of oxygen of having different isotopes will go into the vapor state, and thereby in the polar regions lot of snow precipitation will occur. So 18O is relatively high. In contrast, during average low earth temperature condition, when there is lesser amount of energy is available for evaporation to occur, most of the 18O remain within the seawater. So mostly 16O will go into the vapor state. So during that time, the snow precipitated in the polar regions, that is depleted in 18O. So you have to consider two times, one time when it is warmer, another time when it is uh, cooler, and the energy available for evaporation during these two times. Say for example, if you consider the present day time, now with respect to present day time, it has a certain amount of evaporation rate, and with respect to that certain amount of 18O goes to water vapor and precipitation occurs in the polar regions. Now with respect to present day, if the condition becomes more warm, then higher amount of energy is available for evaporation. So as I told you that at the same energy conditions, lighter isotopes will prefer less dense form. But if more and more energy is available, particularly during warmer times, so in this high energy condition, high energy availability, the heavier isotopes will also go into the vapor state. So the precipitation occurs in the form of snow in the polar regions that will be enriched in ATO. In contrast, during winter time, when there is lesser amount of global temperature, the global temperature is low, that means the energy availability is low. During that time, mainly the 16O, that is the lighter isotope of oxygen, will go into the vapor state. Most of the 18O will remain in the ocean water. So the precipitation occurs in the polar regions will be depleted in 18O. So that is why you can see that this delta 18O, that is the ratio of heavier oxygen and lighter oxygen isotope, will be very much temperature sensitive, and it will show a positive correlation with respect to temperature. With increase in temperature, the heavier isotopes of oxygen are found to be enriched in the snow. Similarly, like oxygen, hydrogen also gives us the past temperature condition. We know hydrogen has also two isotopes. One is the normal hydrogen, that is 1H1, which consists in its nucleus only one proton, and the other hydrogen isotope is known as deuterium, which consists in its nucleus one proton and one neutron. Now, when the condition is warmer, the energy availability is more. The heavy isotopes of hydrogen, that is the deuterium, will go into the vapor state from the ocean water. This means that the ocean gets isotopically lighter during warm times, and the water that evaporates and later condenses into clouds in the polar regions gets isotopically heavier. Similarly, when the condition is cooler, the energy available for evaporation is low. So the normal hydrogen, the lighter hydrogen, will go more into the vapor state. So that time the ocean water is rich in deuterium with respect to this warmer condition. So in the ice cores, in the snow falls, we will get more lighter isotopes of oxygen. So similar like oxygen isotopes, hydrogen isotopes, the heavier and lighter isotopes of hydrogen will show same behavior and same isotope fractionation with respect to temperature. At higher temperature condition, at higher temperature time, we get more heavier isotopes of both oxygen and hydrogen in the ice cores, and at lighter or lower temperature conditions, that means during global cooling time, we get lighter isotopes of hydrogen and oxygen in the ice cores. So delta 18O and delta hydrogen will increase with temperature, and delta 18O and delta hydrogen will decrease with temperature. Next type of proxy from which we get uh, records of ancient climate is from the tree rings. Now, trees that grow in seasonal climatic conditions, particularly in the mid latitude to low latitude regions where there is discrete uh, seasonal variations, they formed some annual growth rings. These kinds of circular to semicircular rings are found within their uh, stems when they are cut. Now, from these growth rings, we can get first the age of the trees, that is known as dendrochronology. Now, also along with the age of the tree, if we study these individual growth rings, study these individual bands, we can also get an idea about the ancient climatic condition, and this study is known as. Now, if we look at the rings, if we look at the bands formed in the tree, we found that there are some bands which are light colored and some bands which are dark colored. Now these light colored bands and the dark colored bands, that is the color difference, occurs depending on the growing season of the tree. It varies depending on the availability of the nutrients at different times of the year. So during spring and monsoon time, when there is lots of rainfall, lots of weathering erosion happen in the upland area, so lots of fresh nutrient supply was happened towards the tree. So the growth of tree, or the tree will get more and more available nutrients around itself. So during the spring and monsoon time, growth is very easy and favored to a tree, and during that time a tree formed a light colored band. But during dry season, particularly during summer or during winter times, when there is not very much supply of nutrients, then in this dormant period the tree face some difficulty in nutrient supply. So growth of tree becomes disturbed. So in this time a tree forms dark colored layers. Now together one light colored band and one dark colored band constitute or formed an annual ring, which is known as growth ring. Now since tree growth rings are influenced by climatic conditions, that is the patterns in tree rings width, its density, and also the isotopic composition in each and every growth ring of a tree will vary from one growth ring to another growth ring. So thereby we can get an idea about the variation of climatic condition with respect to time. Now, why the isotopes vary with the growth rings? During the growth of tree takes nutrients from the surrounding environments, and those things are recorded in the different growth stages of the tree. So, with the help of those uh, elementary records preserved in the growth bands, growth rings, we can get year by year resolution of ancient climates. Now, one thing people has to note that these type of growth rings are clearly identified, particularly in those regions where there is marked seasonal variation. That means where there is distinct change was found in the seasonal condition within an entire year. In contrast, those areas in which where year around almost same kinds of seasonal conditions, same kinds of environmental condition persist, in those areas these growth rings are not well developed. So particularly in temperate regions where there is distinct growing season, we can see these kinds of growth rings by which the paleoclimates can be estimated. Now, scientists build tree ring chronologies by starting with living trees. Say for example, this tree will give this amount of growth rings, and from say for example starting from 2013 we will get growth rings up to 1924. So from starting present day, scientists proceed to the older specimens, and by overlapping these records they will get the record of a larger span of time. Say for example, here you can see again the record is started, say for example from 1930. So there is a overlapping period. We can match these two things, and this record will go up to 1817 one. Then again the third ring will enhance our knowledge up to 1798. So in this way, scientists proceed into the ancient time starting from the present uh, tree specimens, which gives us the most present record of climatic condition from the growth rings. Not only the tree rings, the microscopic organs of tree, particularly the reproductive organs, that is the spore and pollens, they are also useful to get an idea about the climatic condition. During the growing season, during the summer or monsoon time, the trees, they throw lots of spore and pollens into the atmosphere. So when these spore and pollens are blown with the wind and deposited with the sediments, so the sediments deposited during this time, during summer or monsoon time, they are rich in spore and pollen. In contrast, in winter time, when there is lesser amount of spore pollen floating in the air, definitely the sediments deposited during that time, that will also receive lesser amount of spore and pollen with them. So you can say within the sedimentary record also, the evidences of plants in the form of uh, proportion of spore and pollen grains, that will also vary season wise. So by studying the uh, spore and pollen percentage within the sedimentary record within a year span of sediment, we can also identify the different seasonal variations. Not only that, if we study these spore and pollens in more detail in the ancient sediments, we can also get an idea about the types of plants found in that time and found in that environment. So in this way, spore and pollens abundance and their nature will help us to identify the environmental region in which this deposition will occur, the types of plants living in that time, and we can also get a seasonal variation within an annual sedimentary deposition. The other type of plant evidences by which we can get about the ancient climatic condition is the stomatal density. Now we all know that stomata are the pores preserved in the underside of a leaf lamina by which the plants exchange the gaseous material with the atmosphere. During photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is taken from the atmosphere through the stomata, and as an excess material, the water vapor and oxygen which is produced during photosynthesis, they are again thrown to the atmosphere through this stomata. So these stomatas are the doors of leaf lamina through which gaseous exchange are done. Now, during times when the availability of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is much high, that is carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere increase, it was found that the density of stomata within a leaf lamina is found to be decreased. Whereas during times when the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere is low, it was found that the stomatal density will increase. So, by studying stomatal density, which is inversely proportional to the atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, we can also predict the ancient climatic condition, because we know that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas and it is related to the temperature of the then time. So indirectly, by studying stomatal density, we can also get an idea about the average temperature condition of that time. Not only that, the morphology of fossil plant leaves will also give us idea about the climatic condition. Say for example, the leaf margin analysis. It was found by studying the present day leaves that in uh, low average annual temperature condition, the percentage of jagged margin leaf is much higher, whereas in higher average annual temperature condition, the percentage of smooth margin leaf is relatively higher. So you can see, with increasing average annual temperature, the percentage of smooth margin leaf will increase. So depending on the relative abundance of jagged margin leaf lamina and smooth margin leaf lamina, we can get an idea about the average annual temperature of any area. Similarly, another analysis is the leaf area analysis. This leaf area analysis gives us an indication about the average annual precipitation or average annual rainfall. When we get higher surface area of leaf in any region, that will reflect higher amount of annual precipitation. But in a dry area where there is lesser amount of annual rainfall, lesser amount of annual precipitation, it will be reflected by lower leaf area of the plants. So these kinds of morphological aspects of any plant, particularly the plant leaf laminas, will also helps us to get idea about the ancient climatic condition. The next tool or next proxy which helps us to get an idea about the paleoclimate is the packrat middens. The packrat middens is basically the excretors of a type of rat. These rat excretors are found particularly in the caves of North America. Now, these pack rats, or often they are also known as wood rats, they eat different things, particularly the plant materials. And when they excrete them, these plant remains are also came out and accumulated in the dry caves and with different things of excretas like the plant remains, the debris, um, some insect fragments, even vertebral vertebrate bone fragments are also found in these excreta. These excreta becomes very well cemented, and that is why they have a good preservation potentiality, because all these things, uh, these insects, debris, plant materials, vertebrate remains, they are mixed with the crystallized urine, which enhances its uh, preservation potentiality. And these kinds of excretas, these kinds of bacterial medians preserved for tens of thousands of years. Now, these excretas of pack rats or cave rats or wood rats, they are found in caves and rock shelters. And as they contains different kinds of plant remains which are undigested, vertebral remains, insect remains with them. So by studying these bacterial medians, we will get the biological composition, the organisms around it, we will get that idea. Not only that, by studying these medians, we can especially estimate the past climates also, because depending on the seasonal variation, depending on the climatic variation through times, an area have different plant compositions. Now, depending on this variation in plants, the availability of plants to that rat will also vary with time. So, the plant excretas found in these medians give us an indication about the climatic condition, particularly the plants which are formed, uh, which which grew during the time of drought. So the remains of these drought tolerant plants within the medians gives us the strong indication of dry climate. So by this way, scientists can predict with the help of these drought tolerant plant remains the time of occurrence of drought in the ancient time. Here you can see a, an example where a median from Utah contained a bone from a camel. Basically, we all know that camel is an animal which uh, found in the dry areas. So even these rats also take the camel bones as their meals. Scientists clean these median samples, which are often as hard as rock. They use hammer and chisel to remove as much as encrustation as possible. They then immerse them in water for 1 to 2 weeks to dissolve the remaining crystallized urine and release the plant and animal remains, which are then dried in an oven and studied under the microscope, or in further detailed study was done to get an idea about the ancient climates, and particularly from the medians, the timing of droughts, the timing of exceptional dry conditions, the droughts are identified from these. Next type of proxy is found from the corals. Now, corals are a living organisms found in marine. They has a fairly narrow range of environmental tolerance. Most of the corals prefer shallow water with ample amount of light supply, clear water. Among corals, there are certain types of corals found which form the reefs. You can often see the name the Great Barrier Reef. So these are reef building corals, and these corals is symbiotically associated with an algae. The name of the algae is zooxanthellae. Now, when these symbiotic corals living in symbiotic relationship with the algae, and as we know that algae is a organism which can do photosynthesis. So definitely for doing photosynthesis, this algae requires light, so they have to live within the photic zone of the water column. So all the reef building corals, all the hermatypic corals which has symbiotic relationship with the blue-green algae or with the algae zooxanthellae, they have to live within the photic zone of marine water. Now, most of these corals are found in uh, the 30-degree north and 30-degree south regions from the equator. So they are mostly restricted within the temperate regions. So coral gives us a very much good idea about the latitudinal position of that portion in the ancient time, and from that we can also predict the climate. Corals also prefer clear water. They are not found in a turbid water, so the turbidity condition of the water is also estimated with the presence of coral. Apart from that, as corals grow, they form skeletons by making calcium carbonate from the ocean waters. Now, the density of these calcium carbonate skeletons change with temperature, light, and nutrient conditions. So, during summer, the calcium carbonate skeleton have a different density than those formed in the winter. This seasonal variation in density of calcium carbonate skeletons produce growth rings which appears or which looks similar to the tree rings. You can see clearly some bands are light colored and some bands are dark colored in this picture. So these kinds of layered structures are also found in the corals, which represents the formation of calcium carbonate skeletons during different seasons. So they indicate seasonal variations which is reflected in the density variation of calcium carbonate. Now scientists can study these rings and other characteristics to determine the climatic condition during the seasons in which the coral grew. So these coral growth bands allow scientists not only to study the climate, but it will also allow scientists to date the coral samples, and thereby we can estimate the climatic condition, or we can get the climatic variation with precise time. Now, apart from the density variation of calcium carbonate skeletons formed during different seasons, the bands in the coral cells will also show variation in thickness, and this thickness variation is due to difference in temperature, water clarity, and nutrient availability. So each band can record different seasonal climatic conditions. Now, unlike tree rings, in which record is not the thickness but the composition of the layers, provide scientists with clues about past climate, such as two naturally occurring isotopes of oxygen and uh, other of carbon. That isotope study can also be done from the coral skeletons. If you look at the distribution of different proxies throughout the globe, you can see these yellow dots which represent the records of corals. They are mostly restricted within the uh, tropical, subtropical regions, whereas the ice cores, they are found in the polar regions, in the Antarctic and Arctic areas, and the tree rings, they are mainly found in the mid-latitude regions. So together, by combining simply these three proxies, we can get an idea about the climatic condition at different latitudinal areas of Earth. Now, besides the annual banding patterns found in coral, there is secondary banding structure also found sometimes within the corals. And these secondary bandings are indicative of monthly variation in the tides. So you can see here this dark colored band and this dark colored band. This is an annual banding, and within this there are lots of fine growth rings. These indicate the tidal cyclicity, or the it also depends on the frequency of tides at any given spot on Earth, and this frequency of tides depends on the orbital period of Moon, which is rotating around Earth. Now, ancient corals at about 440 million years ago, that is during the time of Devonian, they indicate that there were more tidal cycles per year. At during present day, there was 30 tidal cycles. That means within a month, 30 tidal cycle is happening. In ancient times, it was found there are more tidal cycles per year. It supports the astronomers' view that Earth during Devonian spun more quickly on its axis. So the duration of day during Devonian time is much shorter compared to the duration during present day, about 24 hours. So it was estimated that during 440 million years ago, Earth spun around its own axis at a rate 11% faster than today. And due to this faster spinning around its own axis during Devonian time, there occurs 13 months within a year. And from that, it was also estimated that the rotational speed of Earth around its own axis will gradually decreasing from Devonian to the present day. Not only from corals, these kinds of astronomical uh, indications we get, but the cephalopod nautiloids are also giving us these kinds of astronomical evidences. If we look at the cephalopod or nautiloid cells, it is composed of different growth lines, because we all know in cephalopod cells, the cell is growing towards the coiling direction by accretionary method. So by accretionary method, lots of new cell material is added in the growing direction, and thereby it forms several growth lines. Now, if we study the present day nautiloid shells, it have 30 growth lines between two consecutive septa. Now, scientists, they studied the nautiloid shells throughout time, because we all know that nautiloid is a long-ranging organism. It started its journey from Cambrian, and till day it survives. So that is why it is also called a living fossil. Now, scientists counted the growth lines of nautiloids through time, and they found that between two consecutive septa, the growth lines in present day Nautilus is around 30. The growth lines in the Nautilus of 25 million years ago is around 25. And you can see, interestingly, at about 420 million years ago, scientists found the growth line between two consecutive septa is about 9. So this indicates that during 420 million years ago, moon was very close to the earth, and moon circled earth in 9 days, 9 solar days during the Devonian time. So the Devonian nautiloids definitely can see moon from much lesser distance, and they can see moon uh, in a large uh, enhanced version of the moon, more clear picture of the moon they can see compared to the present day. Now the shells also gives us the opportunity to study the variations of carbon isotope, the different organic cells, particularly the marine organism cells, the corals, nautiloids, and any other uh, organisms whose cells is made up of carbonate. They gives us the opportunity to study the carbon isotopes. Now, for studying any isotopes, it may be carbon, it may be oxygen, or it may be hydrogen, the variation in isotopic composition is recorded with respect to a standard value. For carbon, the standard is considered the PD belemnite, that is the belemnite found in the PD formation, Southern Carolina of Cretaceous time. So that belemnite's carbon isotope value is taken as a standard value, and with respect to that, the variation through time is estimated from the uh, records. Now, the variation of carbon isotopes, that is the heavier isotope, that is 13C, and the lighter isotope, that is 12C, is estimated with this formula, that is del 13C, and a positive delta value indicates that the sample contains more heavy isotopes than the standard, whereas negative delta value means the sample is enriched with lighter isotopes, or otherwise, other way you can see the sample contains lesser amount of heavier isotope than the standard. So positive del 13C means enriched with heavy isotope, negative del 13C means enriched with lighter isotope. Now, the biological processes, they preferentially take the lower mass isotopes, that is preferentially takes 12C. So all the organisms, cells, hard parts, they preferably take 12C from the environment, from the marine water. So negative del 13C anomaly, if we get from any times uh, fossil cells, that will represent a decrease in primary productivity and release of plant-based carbon. That means negative del 13C means it is enriched with 12C. So with the comparison with the standard value of carbon isotopes, if we found a negative del 13C value in fossil cells, it indicates that during that time there is lesser amounts of plants in the environment, because during photosynthesis plants will also take the lighter carbon. Now if plants will take a sufficient amount of lighter carbon, then automatically the rest of the environment will be reached with heavier isotopes, that is 13C. So to get the environment enriched with lighter isotopes, there has to be lesser amount of plants available, that is primary productivity should be low, and that is why during mass extinction it is found negative del 13C, that is enriched with lighter isotope of carbon, because all the plants are hardly affected, so there is no fractionation of uh, isotopes of carbon occurred in the environment. So if there is lots of plants, say for example, if we consider the present day atmospheric concentration of carbon isotopes, so there are lots of plants, and with respect to that a fractionation occurs, and if you take the present day uh, value as a standard, now if all the plants are destroyed in a overnight, then the fractionation of carbon isotopes will not happen, because there is no plants found in the earth. So the atmosphere will be more rich with 12C compared to the present. So by studying the shift in del 13C, by studying the values of 13C, del 13C through time, we can get an idea about the evolution of plants through time. The evolution of large plants in the late Devonian time increased the organic carbon and thereby a rise in del 13C. When during the late Devonian time, lots of land plants appeared, then the lighter isotope of carbon is mostly trapped within the plant bodies. That is the organic carbon. So in the environment becomes enriched with heavier isotope of carbon. So that is why we get during late Devonian a positive delta value of carbon isotopes. The next proxy is the speleothem. Speleothems are the secondary mineral deposits formed in caves in the form of stalactites, stalagmites, and other forms. Now, these mineral deposits are essentially of carbonates, and the carbonates deposited in the caves are controlled by biological soil productivity associated with the vegetation type, which regulates the soil carbon dioxide content. So basically it will reflect the availability of carbon dioxide in the soil during the dissolution of limestone, which occurs when the rainwater percolates through the pore spaces of the soil. They react with the carbon dioxide trapped within the soil and formed minute acidic solution, that is the carbonic acid solution. And when these carbonic acids passed over the uh, calcium carbonate bedrock, limestone bedrock, it dissolves the limestones, and when this solution reaches a cave, within the cave, the as the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is relatively low, so that drives the precipitation of calcium carbonate from that solution. So the deposition of cave uh, carbonates definitely indicate the variation in partial pressure of carbon dioxide in that environment. Now that uh, speleothem deposition, that is the stalactites and stalagmites, also depends on the amount of rainfall happened in any region, because without the availability of surface water percolating through the pore spaces of soil, there is no question of solution of limestone bedrock. So an area has to evidence sufficient amount of rainfall so that that surface water moves through the carbon dioxide rich soil. It reacts with the carbon dioxide, forms carbonic acid, and then it will dissolve the limestone bedrock, and ultimately that solution moves to the cave system, and at low partial carbon dioxide condition, the precipitation of calcium carbonates is found within the caves in the form of stalactites and stalagmites. Now, apart from this physical evidence, these Paleoclimate deposits are also used for isotopic study of oxygen and isotopic study of carbon. The Del 18O records of from the speleothem are particularly used to get the idea of glacial and interglacial transitions, because oxygen, as I already told you in the previous slide, that oxygen is very much sensitive, that is the fractionation of oxygen isotope is very much sensitive uh, to the temperature condition. Apart from that, carbon isotopes is also studied from the speleothems. Next, certain types of organisms, particularly microorganisms like foraminifera, their coiling directions are also very much sensitive to temperature. One, say for example, one planktonic foraminifera, the Neogloboquadrina pachyderma, it was found that the relative abundance of dextrally coiled formed are found in warm regions, warm ocean waters, whereas in the regions where the ocean water is relatively cold, there we found high percentage of left hand coiling Neogloboquadrina pachyderma. So from the relative abundance of different coiled of this particular foraminiferal species, we can also get an idea about the temperature condition over Earth, and particularly the latitudinal variations, the latitudinal position of any place over the Earth. And if that place remains for a long time at same latitudinal condition, then the relative percentage of coiling of this species will also gives us an idea about the temperature variation of that region through time. Not only that, the the marine organisms, which has their cells made up of calcium carbonate, we all know that this calcium can be substituted by magnesium because both are divalent cations. Now, the incorporation of magnesium into marine organisms shells, marine organisms calcite, is also influenced by temperature which surrounds that shell, that is the seawater temperature. It was found by studying different foraminiferal tests that this magnesium substitution is enhanced with increasing temperature. You can see from this graph, at lower temperature the magnesium substitution is relatively low, that is the ratio of magnesium by calcium in a foraminiferal test is relatively low at low temperature, whereas at high temperature, at around 30 degrees centigrade, the ratio of magnesium by calcium is relatively high. So you can see the substitution of calcium by the divalent cation magnesium will increase with increasing temperature. So that's all. That's a brief idea about the different proxy